Good day, friends. Welcome to Gord's Poetry Show, number 86. It's been, 9 months or more since I've done one. And thank you to you subscribers who expressed your love and asked for more. And so for that, I'm going to call this one For the Love of Poetry. And we're going to start with some poems from the collection Solace by Eva Kolacz. And nice sort of impressionistic painting on the cover. Eva is also an artist. Well, a creative all-rounder. The Days of Summer. The days of summer were measured by the steps I took through rye and potato fields, soaked with my ancestors' sweat. There I danced under an open sky as Isadora Duncan toward the river where dragonflies dived into the shafts of light, and the roots of trees as trumpets were bringing laughter in music. The night cooled my young, burning skin in Whitman's long grass, under shadows shaped by trees along the road, where moths were bringing suicidal thoughts to lamplight and surviving by landing on the shafts of darkness. Memories still search for familiar paths, but the scenery has changed, like a river's flow when natural current is disturbed. Morning after. Like a stone, the bird drops from the nest and lands in the backyard grass, flies up and down, burying his beak in animal fur, then starts a zigzag dance. The place is mute as mute can be. The rising sun was turning its back until the dark wings of night flapped a raccoon's mouth, popping in and out. In the morning I pick up from the grass a long grey feather, part of a robin's tail, lying along tiny specks of dusty orange left from a battle. The nest? Empty. The sun blinks, moves closer through branches, slices the air. Poetry is notorious for being erratic. It is made of collected objects. First, you need to catch a glimpse of them, the key for understanding the rest. It exists as an inland sea, a purveyor of an emotional narrative not locatable on any map, and often lingering somewhere around the edges of drama, throwing some shadows here and there, without getting too close. Like desires assuming the shape of the air's elusiveness, often falling flat. Like an empty thought between two prayers. It doesn't need to know where grass comes from or when the sun moves under the horizon. Do not contemplate flight. It promises nothing, but is notorious for kicking into your blood to get high without wings. Cézanne's Still Life with Apples, the authority of the first bite. A little quote from Cézanne here. I decided against flowers. They wither on the instant. Fruits are more loyal. The warm scent has not yet gone from the apple's skin, unlike the other fruits left in the garden. They carry the myth of Eve and Adam's sin, the bite contradicting God's will. Who would predict that their act exposed us to what's mortal? The bowl with the apples suggests profundity of knowing, the bond between us and nature. Guess who would be the first to pick up the apple? Look for the eyes projecting desire. Juicy mouth, the time between thought and action. The stillness before the first bite. Starfish for Christina, my sister. In a murky void she appears, a reddish patch with 5 arms, imprisoned by the concrete walls. Pushing her body into flight, up and down she prays for wings. Faceless night slowly steps into place with a laughing mask of the moon. What makes the body consume its own grey cells until it becomes only an impression of the living thing, where the final dream falls backwards into a black hole, then rises from the bottom in pale silence. Sucking up the brain cells, dementia. Out of a shape that can't be measured, her mind slowly descends from moonlight over the cries of night birds to a land of familiar surroundings that appears friendly but acts as a stranger. It flies and floats in the nest made of grey cells, grows as a void swaying beneath its load until the brain finds itself on the edge of suction. The glimmer of sunshine has flown toward her, like a dragonfly landing on her skirt. She tries to pick it up. Thank you, Eva. Some poems from the collection Tras os Montes by Jose-Flore Tappy, translated by John Taylor. Tiny and bent over the sink, so far from us in her blue apron, lost in her rain boots, she's sorting the black cherries, setting the ripest off to the side, separating them from the rotten ones. She seems to be measuring an old dream from a distance, visiting it with her fingertips. Behind the bare window pane, the clouds leave stains. Silence for her knows no more obstacles. She watches it rising without impatience, like something urgent and endless. How to sleep, though, without returning once more to the vegetable patch? Taking the path again, as if going back in time to make sure everything has been left behind according to the rules, and made ready before the storm. What remains behind some things, sometimes the only chance for tomorrow. On a canvas tarp, she places her stones one after the other, wedges them in, arranges more solid ones. Every inch of her ground, every plant deserves her hand. Cabbages, turnips, tomatoes, lettuces, she spells them out, secures them to her words. Ramparts of voice against the wind. As a girl, she'd run off, fleeing shadows, deceiving reflections, old toothless faces, reaching in the blink of an eye the empty sunny streets. Today, when in doubt, she makes sure, straightening the stakes of bent-over fences, enclosing with a fictive wall some fruit to come, and still taking shape in her thoughts. Better to make ready than to abandon things to the worst. For who otherwise would help her gather up the planks, scattered by gusts, of such a dilapidated rowboat. Little is needed to keep shortage away, but this little is heavy, and from morning to night she lifts it without respite. Thin as a handkerchief, my page I scrub and clean down to the darkness that destroys it and is stronger than words. While she awakens early, like a nail boring into the cold, braving it, moving forward, all her thoughts gathered into a silent point, a single point that hurts. As the years go by, the eldest vanish. Others come and take their places. Every time she records the event, weaving with white strands the births and deaths. What is visible runs between her fingers, fastening itself to the invisible, making brief alliances, improbable constellations. When it is her turn to pass on, who among us will take the time every evening to gather in a drawer these strands, needles, bobbins? Who will sew with snowy little points so many blue stars on cloth made from sage? Incessantly taken up and mended again. The gestures we recite have become almost mechanical, out of precision, hour after hour, until the arrival of the suddenly breaking, crowded pickups, stopping in front of the already closed grocery, spitting out their workers onto the street, each man tossed to the side like a die by an irritated hand. When the pickups roar off again from along the sidewalks, black dust falls over the wild grasses. Thank you, Jose-Flore, and thank you, John. David Adams Richards, well known in Canada for his tragic novels, is also a poet. A fierce and tumultuous doy. Poems new and selected. Here's the classic Canadian subject, snow. Winter love. For me, there is no country without snow. The sun touching the drifts at 3 o'clock a January afternoon, or the black, lightless window and the schoolyard cold, the children heedless to it all rejoicing. For me there is no country without light faint over the birches, straight up against the sky, bald with winter temper, the houses coming unto evening, where young women snowbound think of dancing, or hope for kissing, with mouths wide and tender, long in secret for that sudden embrace, while they listen alone to the gale out over the bay, and know that the hours are passing. Networking. This is a new view of networking, I'd have to say. My brother-in-law needs a new piece for his crankshaft and is sending it from the Maritimes to Ontario by his brother who works in Brantford, who will keep it for a day and give it over to his ex-wife's husband, who has a cousin who works in Kitchener and can get the part from his friend, who works in the junkyard near the highway and who has said, "If you get it here by August, the boss is on vacation. I can rifle through the whole yard after dark. Won't cost a goddamn thing." Cheap at half the price. Teaching children. I knew them once. They were my only friends back then. came to my house when I was alone, arrived on my doorstep in the afternoon with raincoats and boots when it was raining, and caps with their hair tied back or in curls and ringlets. They were 3 or 4, 5 at the oldest, came in for cake or cookies and sat at my table. A blessed hour it took away from my 4th novel, an hour where I was no longer crestfallen, an hour where I told them stories, and they asked when my mother would get home. Of course, my mother was Peggy, who went to work in the morning. An hour where I didn't think of the plague of drinking, the sauce and bane of my existence. Oh, these young children were my saviours, though they didn't know it, and I looked upon them with the love of angels, until the next-door neighbour, fired with justice, in zeal with the proper democratic value. Never one to hold things back, never one to miss her calling, never one to believe in angels or know what it was like to help the fallen. Never understood that good men could be a disaster. Asked me what I thought I was doing. Children who arrived at my doorstep and sat at my table, while I cut pieces of cake and told them stories. How dare I think this was normal, especially when the sky was dark and it was raining that long time ago in the afternoon. Thank you, David Adams Richards. And did any of my poet friends know that he was appointed to the Senate in 2017? I did not. I knew him as a long-standing novelist, memoir and essayist, and I also believe screenwriter, who has spoken honestly and repeatedly in profiles and interviews of his trouble with the drink. But anyway, he's won a Giller. He's won 2 Gemini Awards. Governor General's, my goodness. He's one of only 3 writers to have won the Governor General's Award in both the fiction and non-fiction characters. Thank you, David. Now, on to, I think someone we could call a lifelong poet who has recently turned it to novels. Gary Barwin from Hamilton, Ontario. And his newest collection, The Most Charming Creatures. I won't claim for Alice Burdick. This is all that happens, but I will say it is a true representation of what you see here. By the time you finish reading, you will be older, sadder, wiser. If you were a flower and you read this, you would be a flower desired by bees. You lie in the green bristles, friend to grass, lover of grass, ally of softness and open like petals. That's where the bee gets in, shimmies through pollen. I won't claim the calm of sky, but you've got a good view there on the grass, and you think what you can. Jams, jellies, small faces floating peacefully, closed eyes like petals. It's your brain that's a can. Inside things float that last. Summer song, an old bicycle, beer. Your children loving you the length of their lengthening bones. You sit to a bowl of clam chowder made by daughter. A hurricane, sugar cane, citizen cane. Abel's brother. Day seeps over one horizon, making room for night to pour over the other. I won't claim night for dreams when you're double booked for funerals. Good night, mother, grandpa, father, or that life represents your life. If I had to choose between bee and flower, I'd say choose summer day. 30 minutes late for James Cairns. Reader, I apologize. I apologize profusely. I am 30 minutes late for this poem, which is ironic because for years I have had a recurring dream about being 30 minutes late for the beginning, and now the poem has started without me. Coffee and Triumph. The customers with bicycles or dogs outside wait for coffees, white or black or brown, hot or cold. My poodle grew up with a girl. He loved her as they walked, sniffing the path. He has a great stay and even greater eyes in this regard. He is my king, my elder. You are leaving with him, and there you go. Sad poem. It's really great and so sad. It's not me, it's not the woman or the dog, it's not the coffee, it's neoliberalism. Does it construct the greatness of the poem or its sadness? We're inside it, how could we tell? We're an even sadder story. The sad poem is stuck inside a sad poem and does not know itself. And isn't that tragic? Thrill ride. Someone was pregnant. It was my mother. Hooray! I am to be born. Then I was. You have to be this tall to ride, they said. Didn't think you'd be so small. Then they went away to look at a life-size hologram of a whale. It reached and leapt at the ceiling. It looked like there was an actual whale in the room, and someone was whipping the floor with a river. That's cool, whipping the floor with a river. Lucretius. Here's a poem, Spoons After Lucretius. And run over to your encyclopedia to remember who Lucretius was. Sweet it is, when forks are troubling the waters, to look from the vantage point of a spoon on the distress of another. Not that the sight of another's fork is in itself a delightful pleasure, but rather because it is sweet to see what forks you are without. Sweet, too, to look upon the massive struggles caused by forks, arrayed on the side of plates, when you have no stake in the meal. But nothing gives more satisfaction than to dwell in a spoon, a convex moon in a night broth. From there you receive signals, messages from the obvious, comb-filtered by forks, you curled fetal in its silver funhouse, one enormous eye fixed on truth. Well, something else. It's been raining all night, and I can't sleep. Half remembering a poem, Dave McFadden, you said we should write every day, and today was your funeral. Your urn was exactly as you'd wanted, a Dilbert cooking jar. You wrote that perfect poem I can't quite remember. Why do we worry? I don't remember the rest. Something like we're something, and then something else after that. I think the comparison was to leaves on a tree. But, I can't be certain. Because, I get older and frailer with every passing second. And while Gary gets younger and more fertile. Magic. I get scissors and cut around the country. Then with one pull, a magician whipping the tablecloth from under the china, I leave the ground naked. I leave the trees, animals, rivers, lakes, all water, mountains, insects, plants, fields, forests, meadows, grass, canyons, deserts, snow, libraries. Everything else is gone. We start again. Thinking birds. Oh, sure, I'm a tree without eyelids, a river all onomatopoeia. Kazang, philosophy. Hey, what would it be like if the stars were eyes and everywhere was looking? You said, and I said, it is already. And yeah, I need help with dread. Help with dread. Onion rings? Onion rings. So let's talk about bears. They are big and often brown. Like trees? Yes, but sticky on the inside only. Now imagine if I were a bird who only plucked those birds who didn't pluck themselves, and I plucked myself then. Hope both exists and does not. Conclusion. An onion ring begins and ends with itself. Indeed. The wit and wisdom of Gary Barwin, a singer of mad, inspiring songs. Thank you, Gary. Wasn't that a treat? I've still got a few minutes left. Let me see if I can get something else. I didn't close my eyes and pluck, but I may as well have. I found an old book by Don Coles, A Serious Call. The marvelous Don Coles, who has left us to take up his residence in eternity some years ago. Or was it minutes? Here's a free translation of a Goethe poem, untitled. Over all the hills is silence. The forest fills with it. In the immense quiet, only a few resting birds flutter briefly. Only wait, soon you will rest too. Well, moonlight. In a lit crit piece of this morning's date, I find mention of, quote, a garrulous old cuckold with astrological pretensions, which causes me to grin off and on until noon, picturing a kind of becloaked Caspar David Friedrich walk-on, gibbering under the moon to a nodding off fellow cloakee while on a remote hilltop his tiny wife lies with her white legs in the air, either side of his happy teenage apprentice. The moon pours itself over everything, as it so often does with CDF, although what's lit up is not always grin-worthy. For instance, just seconds ago I glimpsed somebody, I'm guessing Agamemnon, tossing fitfully in his tent below famous walls. And now, what a rush! It's a young Canadian lieutenant during a long and especially, as he remembered, quiet night in October 1917, studying the latest reconfigurations of barbed wire from his lookout post in a trench just south of Arras. I've so often wished I had asked him much more about all that. And right now there's a blurred couple of seconds which could be my chance. But in the moonlight and the remembered quiet, I let it go. Oh, that's just too wonderful. Thank you, Don Coles, wherever you are. Come and visit us again sometime, will you? Please. We need more people like you. So, that was, boy, those last couple of, Gary and Don, what a lift-off. If you're not lifting off into eternity now, it's not through any fault of mine. So, thank you, friends and subscribers, and for the love of poetry, I continue my rather dim and predictable life. And there's more soon. I enjoyed that one so much, I'm going to do another. Okay, Gord's Poetry Show 86. Farewell from a fast oncoming autumn here in southern Ontario.